Hey guys, how's it going? Kripp here. Today I want to talk about Doomsayer. There's not going to be any gameplay because all the instances that I'm going to talk about are going to be very logical, very direct, and I really want to give you guys my opinion and really kind of the answers to why you keep seeing this card everywhere. You know, Doomsayer, we can just knock out Arena out of the park here real quick. Doomsayer's not a good Arena card, but with Arena getting more and more tempo-driven, people picking Doomsayer will often do very, very well. In Arena, it's used in the way where it just trades for a 2-drop. Your opponent plays a 2-drop, either with a coin, maybe he has a 1-drop as well. You play a Doomsayer. Not many people run silences, and that's very much the same in Constructed, so it ends up resetting the board. But the way that it resets the board is the very important aspect to it. So it resets the board on the player's turn who played the Doomsayer. So if I play the Doomsayer, and you have some stuff on the board, and your stuff can't kill the Doomsayer, your opponent's gonna go face, and your Doomsayer is going to activate on your turn and kill all of your opponent's remaining minions. Specifically now, with almost no good Death Rattle minions, it's basically going to mean that their board is going to be completely clear. So you're going to be in a state where it's turn 3 or turn 4, your opponent has nothing on the board, and you can play a 3 or a 4-drop. And if your opponent is playing an aggressive deck, which is filled with 1, 2, and 3s, your 4-drop or your high 3-drop is often going to trade favorably with those, and you're going to initiate the first attack. You're basically going to reset the board and get board control. And that is an aspect that people kind of forget when they choose whether or not to include Doomsayer in their deck. So that aspect is really good. Now, what happens when you play Doomsayer and it ends up being killed? Usually when it does that, it is still a very valuable card. Now, it's been instances where I play Doomsayer, my opponent has like 2 damage on board, but then he uses like 2 lightning bolts to kill Doomsayer so he can save his minion and play another minion. Now, is that really a bad situation? And my answer is no. I think that's fine, because if you really think about it, your opponent used 2 lightning bolts, he overloaded for 2, he also missed like 2 or 3 damage, he would have otherwise gone face, so, you know, you're trading like 2 for 1, 3 for 1, you're gaining life, and the very worst case, even if you play Doomsayer, and you know your opponent will kill it, he can just basically absorb at the very least 7 damage because it doesn't account for overkill damage. So it just has so many practical uses that some of the aggressive decks, some of the zoo decks actually tech in Crazed Alchemist to kill Doomsayer. That's how powerful it is. So if you're ever considering a control deck, you really should consider the Doomsayers. We've even seen Doomsayers in some competitive mid-range hunter lists just to get this board reset notion. It's so invaluable. And there's a few other aspects to it here. So Doomsayers are very good for all the reasons that I mentioned, but also Doomsayers counter a particular card that's very, very popular. So the most popular legendary by far is Sylvanas Windrunner. And if you're ever in a position where your opponent has Sylvanas Windrunner among with a sizable board, you can use a Doomsayer if you have no board. Just play the Doomsayer and find a way to kill Sylvanas on the same turn, and having Sylvanas' Death Rattle hit on the Doomsayer, making it so the Doomsayer triggers at the start of your opponent's turn, so he clears his own board and you deal with Sylvanas at the same time. And this, again, it's very hard to normally deal with that situation, and having a Doomsayer lets you deal with that situation very easily. And there's a lot of decks that rely on this, so it's not just the Sylvanas aspect of things. You have to consider the fact that, you know, some of the most powerful, some of the most competitive decks out there are N'Zoth decks. Have you ever heard of a N'Zoth deck not including a Sylvanas? No, you haven't, because Sylvanas is the best card even if you're not running a N'Zoth deck. So every single N'Zoth deck is going to be playing Sylvanas. The first time you kill Sylvanas, you can just deal with it, but the second time, you can actually counter N'Zoth's effect. You know, whenever your opponent plays, N'Zoth has like 6 other Death Rattle minions. You know, he's got like 4 legendaries in there. It looks like it's completely over. Well, that's when you play Doomsayer, kill Sylvanas, and Doomsayer basically clears his board on his turn. Now, because of Death Rattles, it might not fully clear the board, but it acts as basically like a twisting nether in some situations in the late game spots against these decks. And that is one of the only ways that you can deal with these massive instantaneous board fills that the N'Zoth decks can provide. So Doomsayer not only gives you that like moment to stabilize in the early game, it acts as, at the very least, as a heal, but it directly counters some of these N'Zoth decks. And there's a little bit more to Doomsayer. Now, this is a little bit more fringe case, but it does come up up every now and then. So it mostly has to do with my experience because I like to play a lot of the fatigue decks. Doomsayer also has a very interesting second property where if your opponent has a large hand, you are essentially stalling them out. Now, this happens a little bit mostly in like priest mirrors and like very heavy control mirrors, to where your opponent is at like 9 cards, and even though he has no board, you can play a Doomsayer and they will have to kill it, or they'll just have to play something, otherwise they mill themselves. And that can be a pretty good play. I mean, Doomsayer trading for just 1 card and screwing up your opponent's turn, that's value. And if you're playing the type of deck that actually fatigues your opponent, you're probably playing Cold Light Oracles, it allows you to abuse this even further. It allows you to play a Doomsayer when you see they have like 8 cards, even against nothing. The Doomsayer will basically trade for 1 random card in their deck. And in those situations, specifically as a lot of decks rely on very specific cards to actually be able to win, that is potentially an instantaneous win condition as well. So there's so many advantages to this card. I feel like it's basically the only card that is actually keeping aggro decks at bay. Blizzard has not produced very many high-quality board clears, specifically in the recent past, so we're seeing a lot of these like jank cards from the past being revived in desperate situations to keep aggro and mid-range decks at bay. It's good that we have Doomsayer in this arsenal. It's a very unique and very cool card to be part of the Hearthstone game, but I am hoping for a few more. So I'm hoping that Blizzard looks upon this card, looks upon this situation, and realizes that some of these cards are really the ones that make the game what it is, and we need some more of them. So we'll see what lies in the future, but for now, keep in mind, Doomsayer might just be the card you want to play in your deck moving forward. So check that out. Hope you guys enjoy my analysis, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.